Been to Las Vegas, San Bernardino.
Hello and welcome back to the Pettoon channel. Today we've got a fabulous show. We're going to dig deep into space travel, and to do that we're going to go straight to Ask Johnny. G'day Johnny, it's great to be back here in the Pettoon studios for Ask Johnny. Hey Johnny, and welcome to the Pettoon studios. We've only got one question today, but it's a very important one. And it's from Hoover. And Hoover's in Guatemala. And the Pettoon channel is huge in Guatemala, believe me. Anyway, Johnny, Hoover goes on to say, Johnny, Sir Richard Branson recently blasted into near space. Already the doubters are circling, suggesting it was fake and done in a studio. Could this be true, Johnny? Signed Hoover in Guatemala. What do you think about that, Johnny? SpaceX, Richard Branson.
We turn directly up and head to space. 1 minute to release now.
Yeah, look, we did an expose on conspiracy theories just a few days ago. Went viral, and we hinted that Elon Musk might be a robot. But Sir Richard Branson, if you look closely at the film footage, I reckon he looks more like a robot than Elon. yeah, horse. And as for going up there, well, who would know these days with all that film technology? Does anybody know who was in that rocket with him? Did they speak? Were they real people? Or were they just avatars? Well, it looks real. It all looks pretty fake to me, Johnny. I may be sceptical, but yeah, it does look fake. Really? Really? But did he really get to space at all, Johnny? You got to go a fair way up there to get into space. He just sort of went up there and floated back down.
It's getting real.
I mean, it's all very well saying you're going to go to space, but if in the end you don't really get there, did you get to space in the first place? Oh, that's bullshit. Sort of space to me is where you go up and you just can't sort of float back down. You've got to go through all that fiery re-entry stuff and orbit around for a while and do that. If you're not doing that, then really did you just go up high and come floating back down? Really? Really? But forget about that. But forget about Branson. Let's get back to Elon. Elon's always going on how you should reach for the stars and all that sort of claptrap. And really, he's just going for Mars. Why doesn't he, if he was standing by his convictions, why doesn't he go for one of those far-out planets like Venus or Uranus? Uranus? Yeah, Uranus. Imagine the publicity for years, 10 years of Leon going to Uranus, and Uranus beckons, and funds needed for the trip to Uranus. All Uranus stuff. It'd be hilarious. Well, it looks real. I mean, Mars is just the next one along. Go for something big, Elon. Get your act together and go for Uranus. Now you think about it, Mars just looks pathetic. I don't know why anyone would call a planet Uranus anyway. What the hell's wrong with these people? I mean, the scientific community, he doesn't make us. The scientific community, he doesn't make that mistake since you don't hear of planets, new planets, out there in all the glory of space. New planets being called Cocksucker Planet, or Planet of the Knob, or a new constellation Ball Bag. yeah, horse. So I'd say to Elon, fuck Mars. Get out to Uranus.
Vegas, San Bernardino.
Yes, some people realise that I'm a bit of a writer. Done a bit of writing, a few kids' books. But today I've produced a beautiful story, a heartwarming story, and I'm going to present it here on the Pettoon channel. Here it comes.
The man got out of the taxi, crossed the footpath and mounted the 4 steps in front of him. From there he studied the street. It was busy, lots of people about. He turned back to the door. It was a big old oak door, and there was a little, slightly rusty metal plate attached to it at eye level. Engraved on the plate were the words, "The Society for Terrible Names." The man produced an old-style key and unlocked the door and stepped inside. A A corridor led from the front door. It was high in the old style and a small chandelier hung down halfway along. The building was over 140 years old and it had a musty, cool smell often associated with those types of buildings. There were paintings and old photographs hung along the walls. Out from a side door came a small, well-dressed man with very shiny shoes. He bowed and greetings were given. The well-dressed man took the new arrival's coat, bowed again and disappeared. The man strolled down the corridor, his steps echoing up from the well-worn parquetry floor. He came to a room, the main room of the building, and went in. There was a small table behind which sat 2 leather chairs. There was a crystal jug with water on the table and 2 crystal glasses. Before the table there were 3 rows of chairs. 3 rows of 6. The man went to the table and laid his briefcase on it. He opened the case and took out some paper and 2 pens, a red one and a black one. He heard the front door open and the sound of voices. The voices grew louder and 2 people soon stood in the doorway. One was a man around 50, dressed in a striking suit and resembled the Hollywood actor Cary Grant, a similarity that he played upon quite vainly for years. He smiled and held out his hand. "Scrotum Sack, my man," he said. "How are you?" Scrotum Sack took the hand and shook it warmly. "Hello, Smellick," he said. "I'm fine, and you?" "I'm fine too. Getting old but fine," replied Smellick. Scrotum looked at the lady. She was large, well-dressed, late 60s, with a small fascinator hat perched precariously on the side of her head. Her grey hair was pulled back into a bun. Her makeup was heavy, especially her lipstick. She had enormous bosoms. "Hello, Eleanor," said Scrotum, and took her hand. "It's good to see you." Eleanor smiled back. "Hello, Scrotum," she said flirtatiously. "It's very good to see you too," and fluttered her long black eyelashes. Scrotum cleared his throat a little nervously. "I'm sure," he said quietly. "I say, Scrotum," said Smellick seriously, "this will be a short meeting, I hope. I've got a remarkably busy evening ahead." Scrotum nodded. "Oh, I think it will be," he replied. "There's not too much on the agenda." He eyed Smellick. "We do only meet twice a year, you know, Smellick." Smellick turned to others approaching. Of course, he said, finishing that particular conversation. "Ah," he exclaimed to a middle-aged man approaching, "as I live and breathe, if it isn't Alfred Felfer." Alfalfa smiled back at Smellick. "Ah," he said, "'tis I in the flesh. And how are you, Mr. Hunt? Looking dapper as usual?" "Of course," replied Smellick with a laugh. A few more jovial greetings were made as those there moved into the room. The members began to find seats as Scrotum and Eleanor took their position behind the desk. Eleanor had been the Society's Treasurer-Secretary for 2 decades. Eleanor looked at the glasses and water jug on the table. "I need a cup of tea," she said softly. Then to Scrotum, "How about you, Scro?" Scrotum inhaled. He never liked that name shortening. Eleanor was the only person that used it. "No, Eleanor," he said. "I'm fine, thanks." Eleanor threw back her head. "Cock!" she called out to the little man with shiny shoes, who was apparently somewhere in the kitchen. "Can I have my usual cup of tea, please?" There was a short pause, then an answer. "Yes, Mrs. Cracklicker. I shall bring it out." Eleanor nodded her thanks. "It's Ms.," she said under her breath, and started organising her papers. Scrotum Sack stood up, and the light chatter of the group subsided. "Welcome, everyone," he began clearly. "Welcome to the 104th meeting of the Society for Terrible Names." After that short sentence, he sat down. "Any general business?" he asked, and looked about. The meetings over the years had become quite informal. There was a general shuffle, and then Eleanor spoke, looking at Scrotum. "There has been that drop-off in membership," she said. "Ah, yes," he replied. "What are the membership numbers?" Before she could reply, he addressed the other members. "For those who may not be aware, there has been a long-term drop in the Society numbers." "What are the figures, Eleanor?" She had the figures at hand. 278 worldwide, she said. There was a gasp, and people began to chatter in the room. Scrotum held up his hands. I know, he said, but we have to keep things in perspective. For an ancient society of its nature, the number was concerning. Then a big man in the front said something. "Well," he said, "my wife changed her name in August." There was silence. "Yep," he said, "she had had enough. Couldn't take it no more. He crossed his arms glumly. So, asked Scrotum, a hint of sadness in his voice, she's no longer Yep, she's no longer an asshole, the man blurted out. It was obviously a sore point for him. There was a murmur of sympathy within the group. Well, Harry, I'm very sorry to... Scrotum snorted. A hand had touched his leg under the desk. It quickly moved to his thigh, his high inner thigh. He looked at Eleanor. She was staring straight ahead. She had long had a crush on the handsome Scrotum Sack. Yes, I'm sorry to hear that, Harry, was all he could get out. Surely, said a young lady in the second row, surely we can get more members. People are calling their kids all sorts of silly fucking names these days. Yes, that's true, Urethra, Scrotum replied. I'm sure it's just a case of getting our name out there, so to speak. He smiled at his pathetic pun. Eleanor slid a piece of paper to him. He read it. Don't forget, there is a new member here, it said, and Eleanor had done a quick little sketch of a heart with the names of Sack and Cracklicker scrawled on it. Said Scrotum, yes, there is a new member here today. He'd forgotten and was glad there was something to lift the mood. His eyes went to the stranger in the back row. The man blushed a little. Could you, said Scrotum, could you introduce yourself, my friend? Well, replied the man sheepishly, it's been a dream of mine to join for quite some time. I hope I qualify. Smellick, in the seat in front of him, grinned. Well, he said encouragingly, we will never know if you don't tell us, old man. Yes, said Rosy Nipples, just tell us. The man nodded. OK, he said, I'm a whippet-shit. There was silence for a moment. Then someone whispered, a whippet-shit? I say, said Smellick grandly, that's damn good. From the English whippet-shits? Yes, whippet-shit replied. He was relieved. The Welsh, actually. Ah, smiled Smellick. There was a positive murmur and head nodding within the room. Well, I don't see a problem, said Scrotum. He too was relieved. He was a little fearful that whippet-shit was going to say goblet or something like that, just on the borderline. We will, of course, he continued, have to put it to the selection committee, but I don't. Oh, there's more, cut in Whippet-shit. He was enjoying the moment now. I have a good first name too. Immediately there was a palpable tension in the room, like electricity. Go on, said Scrotum through the expectation. Your first name is... Whippet-shit grinned. He looked around at the faces staring at him. It's Greasy, he said. I'm Greasy Whippet-shit. Another moment of silence. Then another. I say, gasped Smellick eventually. I say that's grand. Just grand. There was a round of applause, and a couple of people slapped Greasy Whippet-shit on the back. Well done, said Sensitive Glands. Well done indeed. Yep, said young Clit Rocket Knob. It's a good one, all right. The meeting wrapped up on that positive note, and after a light supper and coffee, the members began to drift away homeward. At last there was just Scrotum Sack and Eleanor Cracklicker left. As Scrotum locked the door and turned, Eleanor spoke. Well, she said, and took Scrotum's hand. Would you like to come back for my place for a nightcap? Scrotum smiled and shuffled his feet. During the meeting he had felt a stirring he had not felt for what? 15 years? Why not, he smiled. Life was too short. Eleanor's breath quickened. They walked arm in arm to the curb, and Scrotum hailed a taxi. It was a short trip to Eleanor's apartment. As they disembarked from the cab, Scrotum paid, gave the taxi driver his card, a card from the president of the Society for Terrible Names, and said to the taxi driver, call me. And with that the couple skipped away into the gloom. The taxi driver read it and shrugged. He tossed the card onto the console. He had to sign off. The computer voice he called to do so asked for his ID. Driver number 5567, he said. Hyman Tomato Nuts signing off. Signing off, repeated the voice, and Hyman Tomato Nuts drove off into the night.
Well, what did you think of that? Beautiful. I've got a way with words, I think. And it's been very successful. But that's all for today from the Pettoon channel. Tune in next time when we produce hard-hitting exposés on things that matter in the world. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.